the newsagents.
It's Friday Q&A.
Way.
Was it enthusiastic enough?
Way.
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you.
That's better.
Lots and lots of voicemails today, apparently. We're getting lots and lots of messages from
We're
you.
going to start with a question that's been sent in. Would England winning the Euros and a sunny July genuinely give Starmer a boost after the election, assuming he's in number 10? Would it extend his honeymoon period? That's from Andrew Jackson, or Old Hickory, the seventh president
of the United States. It's so... you know what? He's very engaged.
Back
with
from the dead.
campaign.
Well,
yeah.
Tennessee, honestly, they are glued to this stuff.
Honestly, after winning the Battle of New Orleans, he's now worried what...
Trail of tears.
This is what you get, Andrew. You take your time out of a busy day to write to us and ask, and you just
Killing all
get
those
nominal abuse.
A bit of history that we don't learn anything about at school in the UK. Battle of New Orleans, because we got whooped.
Yeah, I suppose in a way it is surprising
Well, we
that
learn
Andrew
about
Jackson
Hastings,
isn't
to
a
be
bigger
fair.
feature on the English history school curriculum, isn't it, really? Yeah.
We do learn about the ones we lost too.
Yeah.
1066.
Anyway,
and
should
all
we go
that.
back to the Euros?
Yes. Sorry, President Jackson. Well, it's hard to know, isn't it? Because it so rarely happens. It's so rarely happens. I think you can imagine a world, right, where if we were to win it, it's not so much maybe the boost, but it's like the collective memory of that summer, of this extraordinary summer where the Conservative Party maybe got destroyed. England won the Euros. It was sunny, and the kind of haze of that kind of lives on.
You see, I've just got a knot in my stomach already hearing people talk about winning the Euros. I don't want anyone to say it out loud. Don't say it, Andrew. Do not put it on paper. Do not say it out
Andrew
loud.
Jackson was a brave man.
Yeah.
The bigger boost.
Because the weird thing is, as always, the expectation is so phenomenal because we almost won it last time round. Anything less than winning is not good enough, right? And that's the end, I guess.
How much political boost does it give? But there'll be a feel-good factor about the summer, just as
I
there
think we'll
was
spend
in
more
2012.
money, right? We will spend more money. We'll go out more. We'll drink more. We'll be
Team
filling
round
the
at number
streets.
10?
Maybe that's the growth. Yeah.
So when's the final?
It's after the election.
So-
it's on the 14th.
So the 14th. So imagine that, right? Keir Starmer has been Prime Minister, a week?
Yeah.
He's gone to Berlin, where I assume the final's going to be. He's going to be there, potentially the photos of meeting the team, triumphant, victorious.
And a Prime Minister who genuinely loves and plays football, right?
It doesn't get better than that. I mean, it might not give him much substantial boost, but as a kind of feel and optics, it doesn't get better than that. And coupled with today, as we sat here today, the Bank of England have kept interest rates at 5.25% in his first month. It's widely expected they'll start to come down, which makes the timing of this election even more insane.
For Rishi Sunak.
For Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
He could have been the Prime Minister with the England win and interest rates coming down. Instead, he's thrown it all away.
Don't say the England win. Right. Should we say welcome to the newsagents?
Yes. Welcome to the newsagents.
It's coming home.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
Should we start with a voice note?
Yes, please.
Hey news agents, I'm C from London and I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I'm curious where you think we should draw the line in terms of respect towards politicians when they're out about on the street. For example, there are many politicians that I really strongly dislike and think have done an outsized amount of harm to society, yet somehow I still feel like it crosses a line to throw things at them. I know these acts are illegal, but somehow it doesn't always feel like most people would perceive this act to actually be inappropriate. Even I myself am not really sure. What do you think? Thanks.
I love Celia's kind of questioning of herself in that, because I think, we kind of know what you're getting at, Celia, which is like the milkshake moment and others. Is it funny if Nigel Farage is covered in milkshake? Maybe, on the one hand it is. Maybe if you think that could have been acid, it's really not. But more importantly, is it kind of affecting the way he is perceived and the way he looks for a boost because he's sort of put in this, missile victimhood time and again, which is probably very helpful to reform, even though nobody would sort of wish it upon themselves?
I have an instinctive dislike of the idea of throwing things or
Me too.
being hurled at someone who wants to be a member of parliament. And I think something has changed. So when, there used to be the odd egg being thrown years and years ago, it was kind of an egg and you knew it was going to be nothing worse than that. But I think there is a real fear now. We've seen 2 MPs killed. I just think that kind of the hurling of objects towards someone who wants to be a member of Parliament and our elected representative, and much as you might dislike Nigel Farage, the net effect of what you're doing is making Nigel Farage more popular, more seem like a victim, and it just boosts his campaign at the same time as just adding nothing to political discourse, I don't think. And if we've got politicians who are asking for your support at the ballot box, don't give it if you don't want to. Which is what democracy should be about.
I also think, actually, that I'm always amazed that anyone wants to be a politician in this day and age. I mean, there is so little really going for that role in terms of the scrutiny, in terms of what it does to your family life, in terms to what you will go through in terms of interrogation, all the rest of it. I almost want to think we don't need to create a situation where we only get people standing for Parliament who are prepared to withstand having things thrown at them, because that seems to me the wrong way about it.
It also takes away the dynamism of street politics, right? It makes MPs... I mean, Sunak and Starmer have been nowhere near, basically, any kind of uncontrolled event in this election campaign. No. Now, as PR for the two of them goes, or PR visits go, it has been so safe, controlled, so safe. I was thinking earlier today, I mean, Starmer hasn't even really done, maybe because they don't feel like they've had the need to, but they haven't really done even some of the stuff that Johnson did in 19, which was imaginative, creative PR events. Remember with the bulldozer going through the brick wall with Get Brexit Done.
I don't miss that. I really don't miss that.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, Ed Davies done all that, hasn't he?
No, but to be fair, I think there's a bit of difference. Ed Davies done the kind of crazy stuff, right? It was stuff that there's no real political message to it. He's just trying to get attention. I mean, Johnson's stuff had a political message to it, and I think that's clever PR. I mean, can you two remember a single thing that Sunak or Starmer have done in this
used
campaign?
to be rallies where people...
Yeah, that's what I mean. Or so at least have rallies.
Or John Major on his soapbox, where you didn't know what was going to turn up.
And I suppose that's what I mean. That's the problem with... And for understandable reasons. Part of it is because no one wants to Twitter clip, which goes everywhere. It's partly that. But part of it is about their safety, and they're concerned about just the kind of uncontrolled mass of the street.
Look,
and that has got worse. And that is a shame because, actually that dynamism, that excitement of street politics is interesting. And it is something that Farage does still do.
I mean, two moments of Sunak's campaign, right? The first, Silverstone, which we covered, where it was so hermetically sealed. There was no one there. There was no voter. It was air-conditioned, and we didn't see him the moment he left the stage, right? There were no voters, in other words. The second, one of the most memorable bits of the campaign, was having that abuse hurled at him. No, not abuse. That's not fair. The GP who asked him about his
about the state
NHS.
of the health service.
And that was totally legitimate.
And it was totally legitimate. But interestingly enough, if you're Sunak, you're thinking, one of those helped me look really good, Silverstone, racing cars, and the other made me look really stupid. So I think there is so little incentive for politicians to put themselves in the line of the sort of the street fight, as you say. It's great if nobody knows who you are. You stand to gain a lot. If you're the Prime Minister, you stand to lose a lot.
I feel we're being rather po-faced about it, and I'm trying to kind of analyse why I feel so po-faced about it. I suppose it was.
We didn't feel like that with The Punch, with John Prescott.
No, it was kind of, that was just seemed like proper rough and tumble politics.
Very rough.
Yeah. Whereas now, I suppose, a few months ago on the podcast, we had the head of counter-terrorism at the Metropolitan Police coming in and telling us about all the MPs whose lives are now being threatened, and some of them seriously, and requiring extra protection. And I guess I just feel, thank God we've got people who want to stand for Parliament, for whichever party, who want to be elected, who think they will be able to serve their constituents well. And I think that should be encouraged rather than, people saying to them, oh, don't stand, you're going to get an egg thrown at you.
Right. The next question comes from Emily in Vienna, sister of Emily in Paris, I'm assuming.
As opposed to Emily in Notting Hill.
As opposed to Emily in London. Hi, news agents. Are you able to explain first past the post in this context? I'm considering voting Lib Dem as I feel more aligned to their policies. However, I'm registered to vote in Leeds, which I suspect would be solid Labour. Is voting this way a wasted vote? Also, I love the polling from More in Common. That's our Luke Trill. How do I find out polling predictions for my area? Devoted daily listener.
Oh, Emily, how lovely to have you listening in Vienna.
Thank
you
you
very much, first of all. Lewis, you're mulling. You look...
No, I'm just wondering. I mean, I'm just trying to sort of... she's registered to vote in Leeds. Presumably what Emily means is trying to
Should you
choose
vote
between
tactically?
Labour or... I mean, well, the truth is that, as she implies...
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I mean, Labour are probably going to win there anyway. So
Vote
it
with
doesn't
your
matter.
heart.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
in that circumstance, I think if you were living in a Labour Conservative marginal or a Lib Dem Conservative marginal, assuming you don't want to see a Conservative government, then it would make sense to vote tactically. But in constituencies which are not generally competitive, which most of the Leeds ones won't be, Lib Dems used to do well in Leeds North West, but I suspect not now, then you might as well vote with your heart.
Well, according to More Common's latest MRP poll, in 5 of the 6 Leeds constituencies, the Lib Dems are likely to receive no more than 3% of the vote share. So you're not going to make a lot of difference if you vote Lib Dem. So vote for what you believe in.
I also think it's really important that if you are voting for a party because of specific policies, as we've seen, to be fair, with UKIP in the past and the Conservative Party, you can influence what happens to the party of government in terms of where they take their manifesto, where they take their policies. If the Lib Dems have policies that you think the Labour Party should be implementing, and we see a massive surge in that vote, then, somebody, perhaps Keir Starmer in government, will be listening to that.
There is one way in which votes on the first past the post, even in like really, really safe seats, are not wasted, which is to do with short money. And so short money is the money that is given to opposition parties to support their activities. It's named after Ted Short, who was a former Labour minister back in the 60s and 70s, who basically came up with the system. And part of the way that short money is allocated is on the basis of national vote share.
Exactly.
So, and it's not a big percentage, but in that sense, your vote will not be wasted in the sense that it will, in a small way, be supporting the Lib Dems in opposition because they will get more money. The more votes they get, it might not translate into seats, but they will get somewhat, to some extent, they will get more money as a result of votes across the country and national vote
So can I
share.
just ask you two, would you tactically vote, or do you feel very strongly against it?
I think I would, although I would be reluctant to do so because,
I would. Yeah, I wouldn't have any hesitation.
I'm annoyed that we have to make that calculation.
I don't feel ideologically wedded to a political party, and therefore when it gets to an election and I kind of think what's the most effective way that I can kind of use my vote, and then I would definitely vote tactically.
Right, voice note, Athena, Northern Ireland.
My question is, Northern Ireland has featured quite prominently in recent elections with Brexit and related issues. This time around I've seen discussion around the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill, but that's really about it. Has Northern Ireland now completely dropped off the general election radar? Also, why do you think it is that no Northern Irish party leaders were included in the general election multi-party debate, despite some holding more seats than the Greens, Plaid Cymru and Reform? Many thanks.
Good question. The last bit first
Is the easiest bit.
Yeah.
is the easiest bit, which is that you kind of think that Northern Irish politics is something that's very distinct from the rest of the UK, and the main parties do not contest the seats in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and the other problem you'd have is, let's say you put the DUP in there, well then you've got to put Sinn Féin in there, and then the Alliance will say they want to be in there, and the TUV will say they want to be in there, and so on, the SDLP. So before you know it, you've already got a seven-way debate,
you
and
do
then
have
you'd
party
have
debates. They're
and you
just
do in
within
Northern Ireland.
Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, obviously the logic of it is a bit difficult because you can say, well, English voters can't vote for the SNP or they can't vote for Plaid's, but they're included. But yeah, it is as often treated as a separate case.
I guess Athena's question goes back to the moment where the DUP became so central to Theresa May because she used them essentially to give herself a majority. Now, it didn't really work because they kept on voting against Theresa May. They voted down her Brexit deal 3 times. She gave them tons and tons of money for their support, and actually it was a bit of a pact with the devil because it didn't really work for anyone. DUP ended up with something they didn't like at all once Boris Johnson sort of thrown her off, and they had this backstop deal, and Theresa May didn't get her deal through.
Although it kept her in office for a while.
It kept her in office at what cost? A couple of things I'd say this time, which is that we have seen steadily the last election, 2019, I think we had the DUP on 8 seats and Sinn Féin on 7 seats. Since then, we've seen Geoffrey Donaldson withdraw from that seat because he is facing accusations of a sexual nature, and so the DUP have now lost 1 seat. They are basically 7 seats to Sinn Féin's 7, and there is the pattern at the moment is a bit more of a surge for those middle parties like Alliance, SDLP, that's where we're expecting some of the gains to come through. The one thing I'd say there in terms of the timing, it's atrocious for Northern Ireland, and the people of Northern Ireland, like the people of Scotland, can be forgiven for thinking, hello, Rishi Sunak, do you know that we have very different term times? A lot of kids are on holiday. By July the 4th, there are a lot of people who will have to do their voting by proxy because all the schools are broken up and they're away.
Well, if it's any solace, it turns out it's been terrible for the Conservative Party as well. So,
hasn't been great for anyone so far.
I mean, the one thing I would say is the ignorance of Northern Irish politics and the impact of certain things. I mean, if you look at the whole chaos, and Athena, you point it out absolutely correctly, when Brexit was around, we cared a lot about it. But during the 2016 referendum, how much consideration was there of Northern Ireland and the issue that would be thrown up about trade with Northern Ireland and the rest of the EU, because
there was
on
a
adjoining
lot from
territory.
Some of us. I mean,
from some of us, but there were a lot of people. But from an awful lot of people, they just wanted to ignore it totally.
Well, they didn't understand it.
No.
Look, one way or another, Northern Ireland politics will matter in the next Parliament because the TCA, our Brexit deal with the EU, is coming up for renegotiation or at least a revisit. Part of that is baked into the Northern Ireland element of it because there is a Stormont lock where Stormont will have to reapprove the protocol, so as it currently exists or as it might be amended. So Northern Ireland politics will continue to matter at the very least in terms of the Brexit process, but it's absolutely true to say that when there's a massive majority, all smaller parties become less relevant.
One thing actually that they're talking about is putting pressure on a future government, let's call it, perhaps a Labour government, to increase funding to Northern Ireland. So, we might not be including it in a lot of the coverage of what we think's happening on the day-to-day campaign. But if Keir Starmer gets into office and he suddenly gets, Northern Ireland saying, oh, by the way, we need more money. Stormont isn't going to hang together. The power sharing deal isn't going to hang together unless you start upping the costs. That's going to be another big expenditure on his sheet.
There's also an Irish general election next year as well, which obviously will get a lot of interest. It's in the Republic, will be a lot of interest because there is the prospect of potentially having a Sinn Féin Taoiseach, and you would have that north and south of the Northern Ireland border, which would be quite a prospect.
Sinn Féin now being the dominant party in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Right, on we go. Leslie Hussell. Can you see Nigel Farage comparing popular vote share to seats won to claim the election has been stolen and people believing him? I don't know why you're laughing, Goodall.
Well, no, I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing because I'm not. I'll explain in a minute. Go on.
Well, Yes, I can see him saying the election has been stolen if he has done well in popular vote share. I'm just trying to think of anyone else I know, maybe on the other side of the Atlantic, who has said that an election has been stolen.
Has he actually said it's been
stolen?
stolen?
He says that he lost the last by-election.
South Thanet by-election
because of the cheating by the Tories.
And there was some cheating by the Tories, to be fair, but I mean, whether it was decisive in terms of it was about local election spending limits, and there was indeed a whole
Can I just go back to 2016 in the US to answer this question? No, it's not stolen. You might have won the popular share, but you played by the rules of the game, and that is why Hillary Clinton in 2016 lost fair and square, even though she got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. It was the rules of the Electoral College, and Hillary Clinton lost.
Yeah, look, to be fair, Nigel Farage has made no bones about the fact that he is closer to the Lib Dems and the Greens on this issue, which is that he believes in PR. Right? He doesn't really believe the first past the post system works, and indeed, you wouldn't believe that if you'd seen yourself get, 4 million votes,
in 2015.
sort of 3 times the number of the Greens, I think, and yet still barely get one seat, in 2015.
Well, Farage has won 2 national elections under different parties under a PR system, i.e. for the European elections of 2014 and 19, and he's not ever famously been able to win a seat on the first past the post personally, and it is unfair, right? I mean, it is unfair. He got 12.5% of the vote. He got 1 seat.
Well, it's not unfair. It's a different electoral system, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is.
It's a different electoral system, but I think it's a well-grounded argument to say this is certainly unfair to smaller parties. It denudes them of influence in the Parliament. It means that we basically take seats away from them that in almost under any other electoral system they would get.
Or it means you end up with a stronger shaped government, whoever you choose.
We did it. Not so much in the last few years, to be fair.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is when we chose the coalition government, weirdly, it was done under a first past the post system, which proved that the electorate had somehow not been quite for the Conservatives, somehow not been quite for the Lib Dems, and that was what we got.
But in a PR system, you would always get that.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so we did it without that.
Well, in that particular election, but with a PR system, you would always have a coalition. So if you think coalition was good in 2010 on the first past the post, then
I guess the question, Leslie, is really asking is the Donaldification of Farage complete.
He's gone down that road a lot more than he would have done.
Yeah.
10
Totally.
years
So,
ago.
in answer to your simple two questions, will he claim the election has been stolen? Yes. And people believing him, his supporters will. Yes.
Well, no, I think there'll be two slightly different things, right? He will say that the electoral system is deeply unfair, and he will major on that for years.
He might
will
say
also-
rigged rather than stolen.
He will say something else, and you can already see this. What he will do on the stolen point is he will major far more on something he's been talking about for years, which is the idea of postal votes. He's been basically railing against postal votes for years and has been arguing that we shouldn't have postal votes, and constantly alleges, I have to say, with very, very little evidence, that there is sort of mass fraud going on to favour the major parties.
Interestingly,
Which is exactly where Donald Trump
was
Indeed,
exactly where Donald Trump was, but is now coming round to postal votes because he can see, you've got to encourage. Why are you discouraging old people from voting for you if they're going to do it by postal vote? You're mad. Get with the plot.
I'll tell you what we learnt yesterday. We were talking to Ian Duncan Smith in Chingford and Woodford Green, and we said, is the voter still here? And he said, no, my traditional voter, has all moved to the seaside in Clacton. So he says when he goes to Clacton, he now finds former Chingford residents in the houses at Clacton. Those are people who have, reached retirement age, moved out of London, moved to the seaside, and are now probably the most likely to be postal voters if the system allows, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, I do think that we could end up, if the polls are right, or the MRP polls are right, and Labour end up getting some sort of massive majority of like 200, it is, I think, going to prompt an interesting kind of rethink, potentially, on parts of the right, including within Conservative politics, about first past the post, right? Because we could end up with a parliament, we're talking about whether first past the post is unfair or not. I mean, we could end up with a parliament where Keir Starmer gets less of the vote than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2017, but could end up with a majority of 200. There may be literally almost no political opposition in a new parliament. And whatever you think about that, and whatever you think about Labour, you've got to say that is an electoral system which you can argue quite strongly is just not working because it's not representing the opposition that there is within the country.
Well, Lewis Goodall, you have elegantly and beautifully segued us into this voice note from Gavin.
Hi newsagents, it's Gavin from Swindon here. If we believe the polls, it seems that the race is now to be the second biggest party and form His Majesty's most loyal opposition. The Conservative Party may be quite unstable after the election and could split. The status of the second largest party could change during the next Parliament. Would the opposition switch between the Lib Dems and Conservatives during the Parliament? What would be the process, and has this happened before?
That's such a good question.
God,
Wow.
no,
So-
I don't.
So you might have an official opposition that then joined with another party.
To become the opposition.
No, you might have a third party that then joined with another party to become the official opposition. I don't know. I don't know. It hasn't happened, I don't think.
Well,
has
the
it?
grouping that has the most MPs
Yeah.
is, I mean, by constitutional precedent, who the King would call to be His Majesty's loyal opposition.
I guess the question is, Gavin, you've got to be thinking that Reform are not just going to get a good share of the popular vote, but are going to turn that into seats in order for that to be relevant. So I think, as things stand, there is almost no chance that the Conservatives won't be the official party of opposition. I cannot
feels
see.
unlikely. I don't
I cannot see them getting less than, I'm going to say, 115, 20, roughly, for a Conservative Party. I cannot see the Lib Dems getting that. And if the Tories, let's just say the Tories were down to 60.
Even then, they'd be the biggest.
Maitlis,
They'd be the biggest, right?
Okay, I'm engaging.
How
in
many
this.
is Reform going to get that
Well,
would
what
help
about-
them?
what
Three,
about,
four,
like,
five.
Three or
If you,
four.
okay, you have 50 Liberal Democrat MPs. You have 20 SNP, and for and giggles, they say, you know what, we're going to form a merger and we will become the official opposition. And the marginalisation then...
What, Lib
of the
Dems and SNP?
Well, okay, maybe not Lib Dems. I mean,
No, I'm asking. Is
but-
that
but-
it'd
your
have to be,
thesis?
wouldn't
It would
Has
have to be. But then you would have the potential. If that last poll that was in the Telegraph yesterday, is correct, and the Tories are heading for absolute kind of, 60-odd seats, you could see that the Liberal Democrats getting 50, 55, and doing kind
I
of a bit
don't
of
think a unionist party can get into bed with a nationalist Scottish party.
No.
I mean, there would be a strong incentive for all of the opposition. If like Labour end up with like 450 seats or something ridiculous, I mean, there would be a strong incentive for all the opposition parties to work very strongly together, just in the sense that there just wouldn't be enough MPs to even do the job of opposition, to
that's
shadow
what
the
the-
opposition
Exactly.
select committees, all that sort of stuff. So there would be strong incentive, but overcoming their indifference to each other and dislike of each other. It doesn't feel.
Yeah, I mean,
likely to
we
me.
saw that when over the Brexit vote, where Labour plus, let's say Labour plus progressive parties, couldn't even get their together to work out what the arrangement was that they were going to take on Brexit over. You know, do you remember all those, what were they called, the different amendments? The indicative votes. Or should we have the EEC, should we have the Norway option, should we have the Canada option, should we have the, WTO? None of that even got them to a place where they could take on the Conservatives on that one issue. So I just can't see it.
It does pose, genuinely, like William Hague had a really good piece in the Times about this the other day, because he was talking about his own experience, obviously, as being leader of the opposition in 97, when the Tories had 165 MPs, which was their lowest since 1906. And, he was saying he felt at that time that was barely just about enough to keep the wheels turning and ticking over in terms of opposition, because when you've got to have a minimum of 70 shadow ministers, and when you discount the mad, the bad and the people who hate you, you've probably only got about 70, right? So if you have even fewer than 165, it's hard in terms of shadow ministers. It becomes really difficult in terms of filling the select committees.
Yeah.
What is the next parliament going to look like if it's basically 500 Labour MPs, and most of the select committees are dominated by government loyalists who want a job? Very little scrutiny. It does pose a sort of massive majority, really does pose problems in terms of the mechanics of how parliamentary opposition or parliamentary democracy works.
Okay, let us take a short break here. A little cup of tea, perhaps. Pay the bills.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back with
and a
Mike.
biscuit. Can we have a digestive biscuit as well?
Biscuit for dunking.
Let's live a little.
Okay, welcome back. Do we say welcome back? Hello again.
Hello again, John.
Thank you. We're going to have a voice note now from Mike.
Hello, I was wondering what would happen if there was a true dead heat in a constituency. After all the recounts, we are completely level between the two leading parties. What happens there? I think I remember a council drawing straws, but it doesn't seem like that would be right to give an MP a seat that way.
I suspect what would happen is you'd have endless recounts, but they wouldn't all... The recounts are never completely identical. That's the thing that happens. And so it will be declared for one side, and then you'll get a legal challenge, I would guess, is the outcome of it. I mean,
you spent too long in America, mate.
In Parliament...
We don't have lawyers here. We just go back to the spoilt ballots.
Oh, we did in Winchester in 97.
Exactly, which is where I was voting. 97, Winchester. Jerry Malone is the Tory candidate. He loses to Mark Oaten by 2 votes in the final declaration. Jerry Malone takes it to the High Court, challenges the vote, and wins his case that the election should be refought. And this is a really important moral lesson about the sense of fair play in Britain. The election is held again, and Mark Oaten's vote, a majority, goes from 2 to 21,000.
Yeah.
And people hated Malone for having gone to the courts to say, I won.
That's what I'm saying. It's just not very British.
No.
Normally they scrabble around in the dust, pick up all the spoilt ballots and go, oh, is that an O or a pig? Is that a 1 or a cross? And they'll actually go back to the sort of spoilt ballots and try and work out what's happened.
What was intended.
But it is. I mean, it is the same as in a council election. I mean, if they do recount after recount after recount and it's still drawn, then they will draw straws or flip a coin. I mean, that is how we decide it in Britain.
Well, we saw that.
Hasn't happened for a long time.
At the Iowa caucus, where you've got this really weird voting system at the start of the whole presidential process, there are a number of kind of districts where it is a dead heat, and you just have to, flip a coin.
Theoretically, the government of the United Kingdom could come down. Could come down to a coin toss.
But Mike, thank you for that dead heat scenario.
Yeah.
Hi, newsagents, long-time listener to your podcast. I'm writing to you from Lanzarote, Lucky Jack, where I have come to
had Lanzarote. Sorry, just stop you there. We've had Lanzarote, Vienna,
Tenerife. We had the other day.
Tenerife the other day.
You know Northern Ireland is in the UK, don't you?
Oh, I know it is, but
no, but he considers it equally as glamorous.
Exactly,
and sunnier in many ways.
Thanks, Lewis.
Given that the Euros coincide with the general election campaign, and football fans can be rather patriotic, do you think this will help reform come polling day? Most politicians like to capitalise on major sporty events. I feel like reform's narrative could resonate with a lot of football fans.
Quite unfair on football fans, I reckon, that, isn't it?
I think so. I think patriotism has to be reclaimed for anyone and everyone.
Yes, we shouldn't go sort of buy into that narrative.
I agree.
I honestly, it's one of the things that drives me mad most.
The soapbox is coming out.
Yeah,
you may not have seen a politician on one. The Sopel box. Get on it and go and have your rant.
Let me just have 45 seconds. The idea that, Nigel Farage said it when he was standing on that bloody, bars table in Clacton that we're more patriotic than Labour and the Conservatives. We're all patriotic. We all kind of love our country that we are in. Just because you happen to wear Union Jack cufflinks or St George's flag socks, forget it. You're not more patriotic. You can do your Lee Anderson and say, "Oh, I've got an English breakfast here," and that makes me a proper patriot. Get out of it.
Bring me
I'm
my
sure.
arrows of desire.
Anyway, wait, football. I mean, I
He's
think
not even a football man, Farage. I don't think. Really. He's a cricket guy. I
Or
reckon.
no, he's a rugby. No,
I think he's always at Lords, but he just likes to get
Lords.
pissed.
Yeah, I
doesn't
think he
He's
just
not-
likes
that's
to
not really-
plays a
it's just
pub
a
man,
drink. He's a-
really. I mean, what have we got? We've got Rishi Sunak, who very much wants you to know that he's a Southampton man.
I've got Susan tickets.
And Arsenal Keir Starmer, who actually still plays football and does his knee in with his friends like once a week.
Yeah.
And Corbyn actually was a very strong, proper
Arsenal fan.
Brown loved
fan.
Wraith Rovers.
Exactly. Brown loved football more than Blair, but couldn't actually get that across as easily, could he?
I know. Yeah.
Look, everyone wants to be a football fan at this time of year.
Well, also, I mean, actually, particularly with regards to the patriotism thing, I mean, if there's any group of people, perhaps the only group of people who, in the past 5 years or so, have managed to articulate a kind of progressive vision of English patriotism, it is the England football team.
Yeah,
who have
remember
done
that
so-
piece? Remember that op-ed piece that Gareth Southgate wrote before the
incredible.
last Euros? Where was it, the Euros or the World Cup, where he didn't mention Brexit, but he did talk about division, and he did talk about the importance of treating all the players as if they were patriots too. And he kind of hinted at, let's not have all your racist abuse, thanks, thrown at them, because they're all expecting that to happen, and we'd really like it not to happen. Of course, it did go on to happen, shockingly, appallingly. But, he was at the forefront, I think, of saying, this is going to be for everyone. This is not going to be a team that you can just decide is, about an old perception of Britain or England
Some of
or whatever.
those right-wing voices were not able to deal with it.
Yeah.
They could not find a language or a register which they usually use to dismiss these guys. Normally they just dismiss any critique of a bunch of liberal, lefty, kind of metropolitan. They can't do that with England guys because they're not. They're often working class boys who have a very particular form of politics, which is actually very, very symptomatic of their generation, actually.
Look,
and they can't deal
Gareth
with it.
Southgate's redefinition of what it meant to wear the England shirt was absolutely fabulous.
Spot on.
I suspect that the Reform people are much more into singing 10 German bombers outside the football ground, which would be more their comfort zone.
Well, let's get a voice note from Martin.
Hi, news agents. It's Martin from London. I had a quick one. Because of how powerful Nigel Farage will be in Parliament, even if Reform just win 2 seats, and how much of a nuisance he'll basically cause himself, do you think Labour, Lib Dem, Conservatives should stand down in that seat to give a clear run for just one other party to stand against him? Thanks.
Martin, you kind of read my mind, actually. I asked somebody fairly senior in Labour what they would do in Clacton, given that the vote there is winnable for either Labour with Tory help or for the Tories with Labour help. At the moment, it looks like Nigel Farage will take it pretty comfortably. Some polls are suggesting he could get upwards of 50% of the vote there. Is it possible to see tactical voting between Labour and the Conservatives in any arrangement? And this person said, you've got to be kidding. Just no way. There is no way that Labour can tell its voters now to vote Conservative in this one seat, because the message that sends out after years of saying 14 years, blah, 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 is intolerable. They would like Giles Watling fans, who's the Tory candidate in Clacton, to come over to Labour's side, and that ain't going to happen either.
It would be a disaster for Labour. They'd be able to... Farage would love that.
Yeah.
He'd love that.
Nothing more.
He would love it. There you go.
They're
He
all
would be
the
able to
same.
say,
They're
there
all
you
the
go.
same.
They are
Yeah.
a cabal.
Establishment.
They are a cabal working together to try and keep me out. He would absolutely draw tremendous
It'd be 10
energy from
milkshakes
it.
come at once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it would be so counterproductive. I think, God, the newsagents are as one on this.
And also, it would deprive us of... I don't know, have you seen the Labour candidate in Clacton? The young man called Jevon. He have you seen him on Twitter? He's basically won the award for best dressed candidate anywhere in the country.
Really?
Incredibly sharp. Look, here he is. I'll show you this picture. Can't see this, obviously. Look at him. Great.
Yeah. It looks good.
Putting Farage to shame. You see?
Where's his threads well?
Very nice.
Very, very nice. But it is interesting, by the
But
way.
won't make it. I mean, almost
No.
certainly will
No,
not
he will not.
get the
But
seat.
interesting how many questions we're getting about Farage. It does just show how he has already kind of reinserted himself so much back into national politics and how he's re-leading the radical right.
Okay, well, this one isn't. This is from Connor. Hello, love the podcast. You read this one up.
Okay, it says, hello, love the podcast, particularly during election season. Thank you, Connor. I have a question about Labour. Based on the assumption that they win the election, we're told that their manifesto is fully costed, that there is no need to raise taxes to fund their spending commitments. But we can also predict that some tax rises are coming. Does this mean that they can, in fact, go back on what they've promised in their somewhat uninspiring manifesto? If, for example, they raised capital gains tax, could that allow them to lift the cap on child benefit, or am I being overly optimistic? Thank you, Connor. Well, we should be clear. I mean, the thing that they put in their manifesto, they've been explicit, is around income tax, VAT, and national insurance. There is not a commitment in the manifesto around capital gains. It's just these are the things that are coming out in the campaign that they're being asked to rule out, which they haven't actually properly done on capital gains. They've kind of gone back and forth.
Yeah, the capital gains and the council tax are the sort of slightly greyish areas.
Yeah.
But we've heard Keir Starmer repeatedly say no taxes on working people. And we all want to know what a working person is compared to a non-working person. If you found a very, very rich working person, are they still a working person? You know,
Alan Sugar a working person?
Is Alan Sugar a working person? Is Piers Morgan a working person?
Yeah.
Why did I mention him?
What, Piers?
He's on your mind. He's clearly on your mind.
He's always on your mind.
Always on my mind.
I think, look, you know, we cannot expect. I mean, I think there's been a foolish game been going on. So, you know, the Tory game is right. Well, you've said you won't do national insurance. You said you won't do income tax. What about this tax? What about that tax? And look, any Chancellor of the Exchequer of any party is going to leave flexibility. And the Labour Party have left themselves enough wiggle room that if they find they've got to raise some tax revenue, of course they're going to do it. Just like the Tories have done that. You know, that's what every government does. What you don't want to be in the position of doing is like George H.W. Bush was, you know, watch my lips, no new taxes. Introduce taxes.
Funny enough,
and
did
then
say he actually said that phrase. Watch my lips. I think he did say that.
He did in that speech.
I'll tell you what's interesting though is that Labour is talking right now, and I think this is relevant. I'm guessing to Connor. Labour is talking right now to traditional Tory voters that they don't want to scare. So the messaging is no new taxes, no new taxes, no new taxes. I'm guessing from the way Connor's phrased this that you'd love to see these new taxes. There's loads of young people sitting there who are like, bring them on. I don't care if you tax people who've got big houses. I don't care if you tax people who've got more than one home. I don't care if you tax people more. We'd quite like to see it because there's a lot of young, maybe first-time voters who might be going to Labour for the first time who are sort of thinking, well, hang on a sec, you know, where's the Labour Party that I thought I was voting for? So I think that they, you know, once in power, and we know that with Keir Starmer, it's all about just get to power and then you can do the rest of it. You can't do anything without the power.
Although they've been so clear that, I mean, Starmer has been really emphatic, and Reeves, that they've made a whole thing about how this isn't just a matter of political expediency. It's not just that they're saying that they don't want to raise taxes because they feel the politics isn't there. They're saying they don't want to do it because they don't believe that it would be right, that they don't believe that there is that it would be desirable to raise taxes, and they think that they can achieve all that they want to achieve through growth. And that is the big question about this Labour government, assuming it happens. What happens if they can't? If they find themselves
and how much control does a government have to engineer economic growth?
And perhaps a lot over the long term. But what happens?
My guess is that they have already cut deals with businesses for investment in a lot of public-private partnerships that we're not hearing about now because who needs to hear about it now? But if they get into power, it will be one of the first things they announce, you know, week 1, week 2. I bet we're going to hear about X, you know, coming in to share the costs on Y. And that will be seen as growth because, you know, we know they've been talking to big business. We know that they've been sort of wooing the people with money. And we know that they're not scared to use private partnerships in the same way that Blair was, quite frankly, and in a way that, you know, definitely Miliband and certainly Corbyn have massively shied away from.
And we should say, of course, even though they put it in their manifesto, the Tories put it in their manifesto in 2019, pandemic comes along, the promise is gone. So
exactly,
you know, 4.5, 5 years is a very long time.
Yeah.
We will be back in a moment.
Right, one final question, and this is from Tom. Hello, newsagents. I have a question for you. Based on the fairly sound assumption it's going to be a Labour government, would you each like to predict what would be the first crisis to face an incoming Starmer government? I'm assuming this is from a listener called Tom rather than our editor Tom, who's just trying to get ahead of the news and start to do a little bit
Tom,
of thinking.
you can just ask us.
Yeah, just
honestly,
ask us,
mate,
man.
just come in, just ask us.
Do a little bit of planning for once. Jeez.
Sex.
I'm sorry?
Sex.
What now?
That's
not
just
not
what
right now.
John
It's a
says.
little early,
He's
isn't it?
had enough of the podcast.
It's a little early, isn't it? It's only 20 to 4.
Have we got anyone out there?
John Sopel's dozed off. He woke up and said, "All right, sex, sex."
Come on in, Pearl.
I don't think so. I think sex is so
Passé.
1990s.
You see, I'm thinking back to 1990s and
Robin Cook.
a
Your glory
little
years.
moment of
No,
madness.
it's tweet, isn't it? It's always a tweet now. It's always a bloody tweet.
Well, it always used to be said that it was always money for Labour and sex for the Tories.
That's right.
But
Now it's actually money and sex for the Tories.
Yes.
I fear. Don't you think it's more likely to be something actually really much worse for all of us, which is something big and geopolitical?
Oh, don't say that.
I mean,
That's a nice way to end the podcast. We're going to all
right.
face
Okay,
a
I'll just
massive
say.
attack.
All right, fine. I'll just say sex, like Jon Sopel, and we can just move
right.
on.
You say sex, I'm saying Twitter, and you're saying a terrorist attack.
Not a terrorist attack, probably more like a state attack or a something worse than a
Biological
terrorist
warfare.
attack.
And that's all from us. Have a lovely weekend.
yes, we just wanted to leave you on a high. See, I started that.
Where are those blue pills?
I started the answers so well with sex, and then you had to go to geopolitical
This is what,
attacks.
Tom, this is what we tend to do when we don't know. We go, Tom, tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll read out Tom's response.
Yeah, Tom, we want your response now.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Sex.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.